Hi everyone, this is Period Help Australia, and today I'm going to be doing video 2 in my series on how to make cloth pads. Today's video is on the cores of cloth pads, what materials you use, how many layers, and how I make them. I'm going to start off by talking about fabrics and which ones you can use. So, I use flannel for all the cores of my pads, simply because it's really affordable and readily available in Australia. Now, most of the fabrics that I use are ones that you can get easily in Australia because, you know, I'm Period Help Australia, and so I'm going to be talking about fabrics that I find to be easily accessible, mostly from fabric stores. This is my core fabric, and I use 4 layers for a regular pad. Now, it depends on what fabric you're using as to how many layers you need. There are a lot of other fabrics, but most of them you can't easily find in fabric stores. So this and terry toweling are the two that I would say are most accessible. I prefer flannel to terry just for personal reasons, but if you have, say, some old towels lying around, you can cut those up and use that as the core. Just beware that the little fluffy bits of the towel will shed everywhere when you're cutting it out. So flannel and terry are the two that I'd recommend for starters because they're affordable and easily accessible. You can also use old flannelette pajamas or sheets and upcycle them if you're making pads for yourself. No biggie, that's easily done. So as you probably noticed, my core here is rectangular and it's going into a rounded edged pad. Now that's because I cut out my core using a rotary cutter and a patchwork ruler. This method I'm going to be showing you is using a rotary cutter. If you don't have one of these, you can look at some other tutorials that show you how to make a core and cut it out with scissors, but because I don't do that at this point, I'm not going to make a video on that. I may in the future. I'll link below some cloth pad tutorials that show you how to make a core with scissors, but I'm showing you how to do it using a rotary cutter. Now, I use this method because it's a lot more quick and efficient in my opinion, and because I've already got the materials, I think, well, why not use them? Because if I'm making a lot of pads and saving just that little bit of time when sewing makes a big difference. If you don't have one and you're just starting out with making cloth pads, I'd recommend, unless you're really going to get into the sewing of them, it's probably not an investment you need to consider, although you may if you feel like it. But if you are, say, starting a cloth pad shop, or if you're going to be making quite a lot of them, or if you're going to be doing other sewing, especially patchwork, then a rotary cutter is definitely something you should consider investing in. You don't just need the cutter though, you also need rotary rulers and a rotary self-healing mat. And that's why the costs can get up a little bit. A little rotary cutter on its own doesn't cost that much. I'd say between $20 and $30 bracket, though I'm not entirely sure for a good one. But if you want to get a range of rulers and mats, then that's where the cost really racks up. And that's why I'd say if you're just doing it as a small hobby, then it's not strictly necessary. So before you decide, before you cut out your cores, you need to decide what size they have to be. And to do that, I am using a patchwork ruler. These are amazingly handy tools. You would not believe the number of times that I've needed to use this, but you can also use a ruler or tape measure and just measure one side and then the other. The good thing about a patchwork ruler is that it has measurements going both that way and that way, so you can do the 2 measurements at once. So what I do to figure out how big my core needs to be is I get the top of my pad, and then I get the rotary ruler and lay this edge that starts at 1 about a 1/4 inch or a bit further in from this side. So I'm not sure if you can see that, but there is a line going down there of exposed fabric. And we want that because that's needed for seam allowances. So what I do is I lay that on there, and then I look how far down I need to go. Sorry, I know you can't see this very well. Let me just adjust the camera just a second. Okay, so I look at this pad, sorry I'm turning it sideways, there we go. Can you see it properly now? No you can't. There we go, finally. So I've left that gap on the side for seam allowances. Once I've got the rotary ruler laid on there, I look down and see what length I need to make the core. And you want to leave around that amount again. So from the end to that point there, that is 9 inches. So I'm going to make my core 9 inches long. And now for the width, once again you look from that edge over this way, and I'd say that with that amount left over, I probably want my core to be around 2¼ inches wide. I'm doing this in inches, by the way, simply because that's what my patchwork rulers are all in and it's what I'm used to working with. If you're doing this in centimeters, cool, but that's not the standard. So, 9 by 2¼ inches. That's what I need to make my core. Okay, so here I've got my flannel laid out on my rotary mat, which is that thing, and I've got one of my patchwork rulers here, and I'm just going to cut off the edge of this fabric so that I don't have all of this fluffy stuff along here. If you don't know how to use a rotary cutter, I'm not going to cover this fully in this video, but definitely be taught how to use one safely before you try this. Obviously, like, these are quite dangerous, even if they look quite innocent, because that blade is extremely sharp, and yeah, my aunt did actually slice through her finger with one of these before. So please be careful when you're using a rotary cutter. Know what you're doing, know how to hold down your patchwork ruler firmly, and yeah, know how to angle it. Just learn all of that before you try it on a pad, please. So, hopefully you know how to use your rotary cutter. You're going to get it and you're going to just neaten up this edge. So, now that you've got a squared off piece of fabric, you want to get your ruler and measure out the length of the core that you're making. In my case it was 9 inches, so I'm just lining up the 9-inch mark along here, and then I'm going to slice along that. I keep on knocking things off the table with the ruler. If you're hearing weird noises, that's what it is. Okay, so now I've got a big piece of fabric that is 9 inches wide. Alright, now what I've got to do is turn this into strips that are 2¼ inches wide, which is the width of the core of my pad. So I've got to square this piece of fabric off again, because you want that line and that line to be at a perfect right angle. Alright, with that squared off, what I do is lay it over to 2¼ inches. And then, once you've got it lined up perfectly, it's as simple as slicing up there, and you've got one piece of your core. Now, because I'm making regular pads, I need 4 layers of flannel. So that's what I'm going to use here. If you want a light pad, use 2 to 3 layers of flannel. If you want a heavy, use 5 or 6. And for a liner, you can use probably just 1, and that'll be fine. Now, if you're making pads of different lengths, then cut out the cores for the larger ones first. And that means that if you have excess fabric left over after you've cut out the core, like I'm going to, what you can then do is slice off some of that, just along there, and then you'll have a shorter piece of core for the shorter pads, and you can just have that little strip of excess cut off, and rather than cut out a whole new strip and then have all of this left over, you're using up what you've got. Yeah, I think that's most of what you need to know. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments below, or feel free to shoot me an email and I'll be sure to get back to you. Yeah, please comment, rate and subscribe, and I will see you soon, hopefully with another how to make cloth pads video. Bye!